Hello and a very good morning, everyone. My name is Zofeen Ibrahim, and I'm a Karachi-based journalist. I'm also the Pakistan editor for the Third Pole. The Third Pole is a multilingual web portal where we hold conversations on the Himalayan watershed and the rivers that start from there. Um, we talk about we link it to health and economy and politics, but most importantly we link our conversations to the peoples who live along these rivers. The Third Pole is an initiative of the China Dialogue in partnership with the Earth Journalism Network. We have editors in Kathmandu, Beijing, Dhaka, and Bishkek. Today, we talk about sand, a seemingly benign material that's being plundered in huge quantities from rivers in South Asia. With our cities expanding at historic rates, we will need tons of sand, gravel, and boulders, and which experts say is going to be a colossal environmental disaster. But from our point of view as journalists, we think writing about it is even more problematic. In India, for instance, in the last 5 years, several journalists have lost their lives writing about it. Others have been silenced by threats and attacked. Back in 2015, Stella Paul, a friend from India, she was working on a series of investigative stories on sand mining in Andhra Pradesh. And she was interviewing a group of women on the banks of River Krishna when out of nowhere, the arm of the crane nearby flung towards them. They all escaped, thankfully. The guy handling the crane was caught, and he admitted that he was paid to do that. I'll leave it at that, as I'm sure our guest speakers will have much more to add. And in a moment, I'll introduce my star-studded panel. So we have Dipak Gyawali from Nepal, Siddharth Agarwal from India, Syeda Rizwana Hasan from Bangladesh. From Pakistan, we have Vaqar Zakaria, and from Southeast Asia, we have Marc Goichot. Um, May I request all the speakers to keep the 10-minute slot, please? And audience, if you have any burning questions, just put them on the Q&A box and we will get to them at the end of all the presentations. In just a moment, I'll invite my first speaker, Dipak Ji, to begin his presentation. But let me just tell you a little bit about him. Dipak Gyawali, a firebrand academic and Nepal's former water resources minister, is a known authority on water issues throughout South Asia. After 40 years in the water sector, he's had enough of dealing with water issues and has little confidence in people managing the precious resource. And so, in his next life, he wants to be a globe-trotting anthropologist. And guess where he wants to do his fieldwork and research? At different airports across the world. Anyway, after 4 decades of working with governments, he is convinced that the politico-bureaucrat contractor nexus, which he calls the Iron Triangle, has done nothing but increased human misery in Nepal. And this observation of his, I think, holds true for all of South Asia. Dipak Ji will be speaking on the sand mining problem in Nepal, especially since Nepal moved to a federal structure and riverbed mining licenses are now being given by local governments. Over to you, Dipak Ji.
Thank you. Thank you. Now, sorry. Uh, we use the term riverbed mining. If you go down towards the plains, is sand mining because the boulders will have already been crushed to sand by the time they reach the plains. Okay, but the idea of collecting riverbed material for aggregate construction aggregates and sand is a booming industry. Okay, uh, highly corrupt, and I'll talk briefly first about the physical consequences and then the social consequences before I go on to the political consequences of it all. Okay? Well, the physical consequence is very simple. When you start this rampant riverbed mining, there's bank cutting and slope destabilization in the higher reaches. Okay, entire villages are now caught in the trap of possible landslides because the bottom of their village on the river has been gouged out. Okay, and in the next monsoon, what happens is the river will just do further toe cutting, and then the entire hill slope will come down. Now the whole villages are being now brought under this kind of danger. Aquatic life is disturbed. There's a massive decline, and I'm quoting from a PhD student of mine who's now a principal of an engineering college here, who did his PhD on the Tinau River the riverbed mining, which showed that there's a massive decline of fish species as well as fish abundance, or aquatic species and aquatic abundance because of the disturbance that this has brought about. Also, the river depth, you know, the depth has gone down, but the width has decreased with really serious consequences that I'll talk about a bit in on the social consequences. And then the groundwater table has declined in the surrounding lands because of this mining. Okay. Now the social consequences that uh, there's an increase in landslide vulnerability, as I mentioned, by toe cutting in the hills. In the Tinau Basin, for instance, 2,500 families were survived on fishing. These are very marginal people, uh, marginal ethnic groups, whose only source of protein was the fish that they caught in the river. Now, because of the decline of fish and fish species in abundance and in species, only 200 families are left that can survive there. The rest having migrated out to the urban slums to become wage laborers. Okay. The third one is that the traditional irrigation systems that we have all over Nepal, uh, they're they're going defunct because the water diversion systems that they have with brushwood dams cannot be done now because the river is several meters lower than from where they could divert water to their fields. Now you can't. It needs a complete different expensive technology to pump the entire river another 2 or 3 meters up. So traditional irrigation systems are going defunct. You know? And then moreover, the village hand pumps nearby are also going dry because the water table has gone down. So, under COVID, forget this idea of washing hands multiple times for 20 seconds. You don't have any water anymore. Okay. Now, the having said this, I am one of those who argue for harvesting, not mining. There's riverbed material that can be harvested. And I argue that the political economy of harvesting is very different from the political economy of mining. If you forgive me for a rather crude language, it's the difference between making love and rape. That's what it is. And what the politics of harvesting implies is sustainability. That comes in the front, that everything has to be sustainable: aquatic life, social life, river life, every other kind of use of rivers have to be sustainable, not just for this current generation, but for many more to come. Okay. Whereas mining means hang everything else, make all your money, extract whatever you can out of it, and that's it. Now, let me give an example. Harvesting is necessary, I would argue. The Kosi River, for example, brings about 100 million tons of sediment every year. Now, you can't, they talk of dredging. Just do the calculations. 100 million tons. An average truck carries about 5 tons. Okay, you find out that you need about 5,000 trucks working 24 hours, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. Just to get rid of the average 100 million tons of Kosi sediment. Now, the question is, where will you even put it? Okay. Now, these are very complex questions, which means that some kind of harvesting is necessary, probably even good, but this has not been even thought of. We have governments that are only interested in the revenue that they make from licensing out. And with the local governments right now, it's a free for all. Okay. And the big evil that I see here is that there are windfall benefits to these miners that are not properly taxed. If we could only tax their windfall benefits, I think there'd be a lot more decline, and the country's society would be more prosperous from that revenue. But where is that revenue going? That massive windfall? That windfall is going towards distorting our entire democracy, not just in Nepal, but across South Asia. Okay, what we have is that there's a nexus between, in Nepal they are known as crusher Vyavasai, crusher industrialists. They crush stones. Okay, so there's crusher wallas. There's a nexus between the crusher wallas, the bureaucrat, and the politician. One feeding the other. So much so that most of these crusher guys get themselves elected to local bodies or national bodies as members of parliament, senators, or whatever, or they get their acolytes whom they fund. Okay, and the cycle goes on. Here is a newspaper headline from just 2 days or 4 days ago, which basically says the crusher guys are so powerful, that they can transfer all the district officers, the chief district officers, the equivalent in I believe British ruled parts of South Asia, called district commissioners, I believe. And they can have them transferred the moment they try to do any regulation. Okay, there's a celebrated case a year ago of Dilip Mahato, an activist who tried to stop this rampant crusher destroying the village and the school next door and all. He was murdered, run over by one of these strippers, as they're called. Okay, and uh, they're not only capable of transferring officers around, they keep, forget regulations, they murder activists. So the bottom line is that unless we ban riverbed mining and go for riverbed harvesting, that requires extremely strong regulation, extremely strong participation of the social activist civic forces, from schools to all kinds of bodies. I think we're going to have a very, very distorted mafia rule in place of democracy. I think I'll stop there.
Thank you so much, Dipak ji. That was not only a very grim, gloomy picture, but a scary one. But I'm glad you brought out a bit of the optimism, how it can be resolved. Thank you very much. And I'm sure everyone is brimming with questions, but these will have to wait, friends. Or you can also put them in the chat box, and we'll get Dipak ji to respond to you later. Now let me introduce my next guest. Siddharth Agarwal is founder of Veditum India Foundation. He wears many hats. He's a photographer, filmmaker, a storyteller, and also an aerospace engineer. And the last one I suspect was to keep Ammi Appa happy. Those who do not know Sanskrit, Veditam means to understand. It's a non-profit research and media organization working in the fields of environment, culture, and society. The more interesting thing about Siddharth is what I'm about to tell you now. 4 years ago, one sweltering June day in 2016, he started his walk along the Ganga River. And he continued till October, paused, and then restarted and continued till February 2017. By the end, he had covered about 3,000 kilometers, which he said was strewn with people's stories. So why does Siddharth walk? He says it's a way of slowing down. When he walks, he looks around. It helps him think, observe, and that helps him challenge the status quo. There are others who've joined him, and there are people who have started their own walks. And Siddharth says that almost always they say that something inside them changes. He also thinks that slowing down is our best bet to warding off climate change or the effects of the climate change. There is something else many people don't know about Siddharth. He does origami, mostly tessellations. And he says folding paper helps him, like his walk, helps him think. For today, though, he has found time to talk with us and share his research on the violence associated with illegal sand mining. So, over to you, Siddharth.
Thank you so much for that generous introduction. I'm going to share my screen. Please confirm if you can see it. Is this visible? Yeah. Okay. Um, all right. One second. I think a lot of what Zofeen said, sort of, and also what Deepak ji said, feeds into what I'm going to talk about in terms of riverbed mining in South Asia. I'm going to talk about India. But two essential things I think really I would want to start with is first the idea of slowing down. That as long as we have this economy that runs on the idea of consumption, it will be very difficult for us to control any kind of growth, which Deepak ji talked about, that we can harvest, but we can't mine. So mining falls really under the category of consumptive growth, whereas more inclusive growth will require us to be more mindful, and for that we will need to slow down and not look at just the stock market. And the other thing I'd want to talk about, take from this, is the idea of observation and how simple observations can also really help us. My presentation is going to be focused mostly on media personnel. So with that, I'll start very quickly with an introduction, though Deepak ji has already mentioned. The Himalayan rivers have such a huge gradient. I mean, this is a visualization made by this person called Raj Bhagat on how quickly the rivers reach the plains in where we are. And that brings with it a lot of sediment. There's a lot of, when we say riverbed mining, the sand, gravel, and boulders all being mined. Um, Professor Sinha from IIT Kanpur, however, in the recent India Rivers Week event, said that the cratonic sands from central India that are preferred more than the Himalayan sands for construction. Uh, but even then, we see large scale mining in the Himalayan rivers too. Um, this large scale sediment, which would have come to the plains, is actually also restricted by the presence of these huge dams and barrages, which restrict sediment flow and affect the river's flow, as well as sediments that should have reached some places. Uh, and of course, the impunity with which this whole sector operates, there is nothing that is safe. This is dredging there's a picture of dredging that's happening in the habitat of the Gangetic dolphins in Bihar in India, and nothing is sacred as far as sand mining or riverbed mining is concerned. Uh, and in the past 1.5 months, 2 months, we've spoken to a lot of, recently we've spoken to a lot of representatives and officials, and a lot of a singular line that has repeated often is that the laws are in place. It's just the enforcement that's missing. But the question is that, are the laws even perfect? Are the laws even taking into consideration the realities of the rivers, the realities of boundary politics, the realities of administration? And Parul Gupta, I think, in the North Zone webinar that we had for India Rivers Week, said something very interesting, which has stayed with me, is the fact that the uh, current framework asks districts to judge how much sand can be mined. They don't ask them to judge how much sand should be mined, but how much sand can be mined. And I'll take you through an example to highlight why this is important, where Parul says that we should actually judge mining capacity based on a river, not a district. Taking you through an example of a sand quarry on the Haryana-Uttar Pradesh border. This is a state border. And this is an image from the environmental impact assessment report that was created for that particular site. This is 2015. And if you look at 2020, you see there's a drastic change in the situation on land. Let me just zoom in a bit and show you that this is roughly the border that you can uh, roughly the border of, the river really forms the border here. It's based on the Thalweg system, which considers the lowest point of the river to be the boundary between two administrative regions. And this boundary, I think, And it goes back to the idea of observation, that this boundary invisibilizes so many things that we need to slow down and start thinking about what this boundary really means. Um, the I'll not read this out, but mention that the district survey report of the areas considers that all the mining that they do gets replenished every year. How that happens, does it really happen, is a question that is not answered. This is an assumption. Um, the combined effect of different districts considering the same stretch, the potential of a same stretch of a river, is additive, whereas it does not find space in actual administration. Um, and uh, how does this border opens up to an immunity portal for people who are indulging in this illegality? And also the question is that when it's a border space, how do you uh, pin accountability? So let me just quickly take you through a few maps. This is one of the area that I was talking about. This falls on the border of two states, Haryana and Uttar Pradesh, but it also falls on the borders of Yamunanagar and Saharanpur district, though different states. But are these the only borders? But the borders increase when you look at the assembly constituencies. And if you further look, the borders increase in terms of parliamentary constituencies where the river is located. And each of these administrative boundaries that I've talked about, I've not even talked about the police station administrative boundaries, uh, uh, jurisdiction boundaries, but each of these layers of administration need to be held accountable, because what we do when we talk about uh, a mafia is that we invisibilize this whole web of people who are involved. The people in the assembly constituency, parliamentary constituency, the block development officers, the DMs, the superintendent of police. So I think we need to rework our language, because like borders, language has the ability to invisibilize, and we need to revisibilize all of this. Um, this is a flowchart I took out from an assessment report for a mine in the same spot that I just showed to you. But this simple chart hides so much. And that is, I think, the challenge for all media personnel or activists or storytellers working on this in this field, is to identify the fact that there are 100 sites of violence encapsulated within that one flowchart. And those sites of violence, I'm going to try and visualize it for you. And even this is not going to be complete, not exhaustive, but uh, as humans in the Anthropocene, which what has brought us to the Anthropocene somewhat is the fact that we invisibilize all other kinds of violence except those where, say, a human death is involved. But if you see the picture on your screen right now, this is an auto filled with people, which is almost on the verge of collapsing, because the road that they're traveling on from their village to the nearby market is completely destroyed, because overladen sand trucks, which are not supposed to be plying there, are operating there, and the road's capacity is not enough to carry those trucks. And this is a sort of violence that we can observe, that we can see only if we slow down. And that is important. I saw this only because I was walking across central India when I took this photograph. Um, Even if you consider just human deaths as violence, what is important to know that even in the case of human deaths, the numbers are mind boggling. This is a report from South Asia Network for Dams, Rivers and People, who've helped us visualize the idea on the scale of this violence. But even this is a limited report. Even this report is limited by the language barriers. But to imagine how much worse this is something that should really worry all of us, because it seems that this is the only kind of violence that we relate to. Quickly moving on to the idea of sites of violence, I wanted to just show this in front of all of you to uh, give us a sense of what are these sites of violence and what all does this include. And while being sites of violence, these are also sites of evidence. These are also sites of conflict. And as anybody who's interested in this idea of what is how do we report on this, or what do we report about this, or how do we trace the flow of resources? I think there is a lot of sites of conflict that we can explore to tell the story. However, there are a few challenges that uh, lie in the path of media personnel and others who want to report on this topic. And just to give you a quick, I won't read this out, but two major problems that exist is that there is no data. Wherever there is data, or apps, even in the absence of data, the scale of it is very overwhelming, so it's very difficult to confront it. And there is lack of coordination amongst all of I mean, I think there could be better coordination in the reporting around this. And of course there is the issue of safety. Um, the what can we do? How do we solve this? I think technology can become an aid for us, but only if it enables community. I think otherwise it's again the tool of the powerful to do what they want to do. Um, and my organization Veditum is working on this. I'm also working with other organizations uh, to push forward the campaign on sand mining. But this is my last slide, so I won't take long, more than 30 seconds. Uh, the I do see that there is a inertia against adoption of technology, which is fair enough as well, because the idea that it further alienates the community from access is pretty correct. But I think that if we do adopt technology via a community inclusive model where the community is part of the um, whole project, so that can really empower the community to take up action. Because everything that has happened in the past few years of me observing this sector has happened because people have stood up to the mafia, people have filed PILs, people have done jal satyagrahas, or they just stood in water to fight against sand mining. So I think if we take all of this and empower them further to and sort of not be overwhelmed by the scale, I think we can really solve this problem to some extent. Of course, not to a large extent. Yeah. Uh, so that's my presentation. Sorry for overshooting by a couple of minutes. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you very much, Siddharth. I think that was a very good presentation, especially if our media friends are around and they can learn, and also they can probably see that some of the things that you said is what we face, not just in sand mining, which is lack of data and so difficult to confront, without data. All these things are which we face all the time, also around South Asia, not probably not just in India. But I like the idea of sites of violence and story to make storytelling go hand in hand with the sites of violence. Thank you very much, and I will now quickly move on to our next guest. Ladies and gentlemen, she is Syeda Rizwana Hasan, and she heads the Bangladesh Environmental Lawyers Association and is a pioneer among lawyers in South Asia. Rizwana is a winner of the Ramon Magsaysay Award for her courageous leadership in judicial activism. She sees people's rights to a good environment as nothing less than their right to dignity and life. I really like that. Very important. Last week, our eco warrior won an important case against a mighty land grabber. And these days, like right now, she's busy prepping for another important suit against sand mining from the hilly streams of Habiganj, a northeastern district of Bangladesh. Today, she will tell us not only about the situation in Bangladesh, but also the legal remedies to illegal sand mining that have been tried all over South Asia. She will tell us what worked, what didn't, and where we can go on from here. So, over to you, Rizwana.
Yeah, thank you very much. I don't have a very structured PowerPoint presentation like Siddharth, uh, but I mean, things would have been much easier if I was just allowed to say that I echo whatever my previous speakers have said from a social, ecological, economic, and political perspective. It's just the same here in Bangladesh, no difference at all. I just have three slides that I wanted to show to the audience. This is actually a river which used to be very, very, very popular with the tourists. So it actually flows from India through Sylhet, and the water of it was crystal clear, as you can see on the left hand side of the picture. You can see the slides, right? Okay. And then on the right hand side, it is the same river that you see now. So what they have done is, for extracting stones from this very river, they first started the manual process, then they went for mechanized extraction, and then for the last 10 years, they were actually using a technology, something invented by them. But and for that, they actually put a dynamite at the bed of the river, get a blast of it. So whatever stone you have there on the riverbed just comes up. And in the whole process, the entire river has dried up, and this is how it looks today. And this is how sands are being transported from this river, but it's very common in any river where we have balu mahals, sand mahals as we call them. It's a very common scenario. You will see trucks piled up and carrying all sand, stones that are being extracted. And this is another picture where some tribal communities live. We in Bangladesh are not allowed to use the term indigenous anymore. And there has been a circular issued from the NGO Affairs Bureau, which says that NGOs cannot be using the term indigenous. We have to call them either tribal groups or, by some other nomenclature. So this is where they live. And this is where they get the white sand from, which is very important for the ceramic industry. It is a picturesque place, but look at what has been done to it. I mean, all the hills are gone. The river stream is very muddy. The people can't use the river water anymore. The fishery is gone. And all their houses are always in the risk of collapsing. If there is any moment, a slide in the mountain, then all the people who are living there will just have to embrace death. That's the only option they're left with. So this is my legal slide. Okay. So it's just few talking points. It's not that we don't have law here in Bangladesh. I think with India, we have that British introduced Mine Act. And then in independent Bangladesh, we had a parent law on mining not under that, but to complement it, we have a separate law that deals with sand mining only. And under that parent sand mining law that was enacted in 1990, we had a rule, 2010, we have a sand mining rule also that was framed in 2011. As per the rule, it is the local administration that actually declares sand mahals that are to be leased out for extraction purposes, and it is the district level administration that maintains a list of all these sand mahals that can be leased out. The law actually says that it can be in rivers, it can be in hilly streams, and it can be also within a tea garden. But subsequently, through a gazette notification, they have said that the the hilly streams within the tea gardens shall not be used for sand extraction purposes. There are requirements for land survey. There are requirements for hydrographic survey. I don't know how much of it is at all done, because we have got series of cases where, part of river was declared as sand mine and was leased out, totally ignoring the objections of the local people that were raised the previous years. So the local administration is supposed to look into the environmental impact, social impact, economic impact, and then only keep a particular sand mahal in the list or delist it. Delisting hardly occurs. And the list of sand mahal actually is increasing every year. There is no legal requirement in Bangladesh on EIA. I know that the National Green Tribunal in India has directed EIA to be conducted. There is no legal requirement in Bangladesh for obtaining environmental clearance for sand mining. The district level committee, of course, includes police, because there are also murders here in Bangladesh. There are serious, riots, serious conflicts within communities. So police has been included in the community, but I have never seen that a sand miner has been jailed because of killing someone, although the mobile court often jails people who are involved in the dredging process. So the laborers, not really the miner, not really the lessee that has signed the agreement with the government. We do have, and in the Bangladesh law, the most alarming part is you can extract sand, use for your own development purposes. And the government, if it considers that it's prudent for economic interest, it can actually allow sand to be exported. So that's most dangerous. Um, the law actually says few general things about use of particular method that will be allowed, others will not be allowed. The slopes of river will have to be maintained. Your mining cannot cause river erosion, cannot cause erosion of cropland, household, but that's very common phenomenon. Water quality has to be maintained, fishery biodiversity cannot be impacted. But who is doing the impact assessment? If it is the deputy commissioner, does he have the expertise to do it? The district level committee, of course, includes Department of Environment representative, but in front of his bosses, he's actually very helpless. And there is so much of pressure on him from the local member of parliaments, from the local government elected representatives, that the DOE person hardly has any say. The law also says that when you extract, you can't be putting the extracted sand on the riverbank, let alone leave riverbank. They actually put the sand on the side of the river itself. So they actually hampered the flow of the river also. There is no regulation on transportation, something that Sri Lanka has recently introduced to check, carrying of sand that has been extracted beyond the lease agreement. We tried RTI applications, but we failed to really gather information about what amount of revenue the government is getting by destroying the entire river network for sand and stone mining. So no information on total extraction, no information on revenue. And the punishment is just maximum 2 years or 50,000 taka. It brings so much of money for the miners that they would rather be paying this fine, if at all, if ever any mobile courts gets there and actually fines the miner. So if I was a miner, I would rather be paying the fee and not comply with the conditions at all. It's so little. So the recommendations, I would say that we really need to revisit the rules and make environmental impact assessment and social impact assessment mandatory with public hearing. What's happening here is there's no public hearing at all. I'm not saying that environmental impact assessment will solve all our problems, because we know how those are tampered with and how environmental clearances are issued. But at least those of us who oppose will have a legal document to show before the court. Instead of public hearing being held, people who are opposing are being criminalized. That has to be stopped. There has to be monitoring. It requires the DC to monitor, but the DC does not have the expertise. There has to be a transparent mechanism for monitoring. There is legal requirement in Bangladesh that the DC will be listing all the people who are getting leases. So if we have a list of leases, why can't we actually bring them under some sort of accountable mechanism? Because they're all powerful and politically and economically very connected people. Transportation has to be regulated, and we actually have to look for alternatives. Yes, harvesting may be crucial, particularly for a delta country like Bangladesh, but to what extent, that has to be defined very clearly in the agreement, and that has to be monitored, which at the moment is not being monitored. I don't think, Zofan, that anything has worked very successfully in any part of this of South Asia, but in some parts, some movements have been successful because the administration was more sensitive. So I think it's very important that it's not the local administrator who should be looking into the environmental and the social aspect. It should rather be the relevant agencies. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Rizwana. That was very, very insightful. And I think a lot of what you've said is what is happening all across South Asia. And my next speaker actually, your presentation actually falls in very well with my next speaker, who I'm just going to introduce is Vaqar Zakaria Saab, Managing Director of Hagler Bailly in Pakistan, a firm that carries out environmental consultancies work here. So he does a lot of, he's a guru of EIAs and SIAs and all those things. So his work is clearly his passion that keeps him on the move over mountains, vales, and plains. He implores governments, industries, and communities to take care of the rivers, and he meticulously makes plans and strategies to protect and manage the river ecosystems, always ensuring local communities come first. But Vaqar Saab has another claim to fame. His friends say he makes the most yummiest finger-licking, thin-crusted pizzas in the whole of Islamabad. Even the sun-dried tomatoes he uses for topping is not the canned variety, but done at home. That'll have to wait, Vaqar Saab. Today, though, we will ask you to talk about how to get around to resolving sand mining issue in a country that is fast becoming urbanized and coming up with hundreds of housing projects. Don't take them head on or you will get crushed, you had warned. For if you mess around, they will kill you. So powerful is this mafia, you had told me earlier. So over to you, Vaqar Saab.
Thank you, Zofeen. Well, the situation here in Pakistan, actually, some of the pictures, if I present it here, it would be very difficult to tell whether they're from Pakistan or Bangladesh or India or Nepal. It's very similar. What I will do is I will go over two case studies to show what has worked, not what we have thought about will work, but what has worked and where we are still struggling. So just a caution, I don't have a very long history with rivers, about 13 years. I basically wear two hats. One is the business hat that Zofeen has just talked about. The other one is an advocacy and environmental hat, which is Himalayan Wildlife Foundation, which I found with some friends 30 years back. And we've been working on protected areas and rivers. And quite a bit of my work has been in national parks with rivers in them. And about 12 years back, we worked with the government and the politicians and the communities to form the first river national park in Pakistan, which is the Poonch River Mahseer National Park, specifically meant for protecting the endangered Mahseer fish. So now the level of crisis is extreme. The way I look at it, I'm not looking at the rivers as a sand mining issue only. I look at rivers as living rivers, and my mentor, Dr. Jackie King, she won the Stockholm Water Prize last year. She's the one who helped me look at the rivers in a different way. Basically, living rivers, we have the case of New Zealand. And if you really work on the rivers, the living rivers, you'd appreciate. And it comes to a point where I was thinking like a fish, that if I were a fish and all this is happening, what it would mean to me. Now that gives a very different perspective. So in terms of how we go about it, briefly, there is a advocacy, a realization part of it, and there's a science part of it, and then there's a strategy part of it, and then there's the action. And Just to give you some examples, I'll take over the screen. I hope I can for a moment and run through this case study quickly. This is the Poonch River. You can see what it looks like, pristine, habitats, river banks, everything. And typical what's happening in here, all the mechanized rape, as Dipak said, is going on. This river stretch from 150 meters is now half a kilometer wide. And worse, which you may or may not have seen, when you block the tributaries with passages, then the access to breeding areas of the fish is gone, and the river becomes a very different river. Now, this Poonch River, 12 years, 13 years back, we worked with the communities and the government to notify it as a national park, and mining was going on over there. What we did next, I think what Rizwana would find it interesting, we dived into the legislation on fisheries and wildlife. And what we did was we introduced some new clauses. Sustainable harvesting of resources in national park. So they're no longer exclusively protected areas. So with community participation, sustainable harvesting is possible. So that was a legal change that enabled a lot of things. Now, what we do next? Well, there's a hydropower dam which makes things even worse. So there was a biodiversity action plan as a part of environmental impact assessment. And that's where the EIA comes in. We had an EIA, there was a biodiversity action plan which said we have to look after illegal fishing, sand, gravel mining, water quality. Not just sand, gravel mining in the river was, in our view, 1/3 of the problem. Encroachment on the riverbanks, water quality deterioration, and using dynamite and explosives to kill the fish in the river. These were all the problems that were going on. Now, the size of it first, where the mining is taking place, we're not looking at sand, we're looking at boulders, gravel and sand and silt separately. So there's a complete mapping in the basin, the big ones, the small ones, where they are, the main river, the tributaries, the whole living basin. Existing legislation, very typical of what's going on, but here's the approach to management, and we've gone through this. How much sediment is coming in, how much is being deposited, how much is being extracted, is there a balance or not? Where are the ecological and community sensitivities? If we have to change where we relocate mining, and what do we do about vulnerable groups in businesses and along in the communities? There are all these balances. The size of it, we have integrated ecosystem, river ecosystem models working with southern waters in South Africa. These are very complex models that take into account hydrology, sediment flows, linkages with ecosystems, linkages with ecosystem services, and we can change things and see what happens if we take certain actions. So there's about 6, 7 disciplines working on these things. We look at what's coming in, and finally, I just go down to what it ends up with. This one map, basically, if you look at it, it just says what you can do where, how much, or what type of mining of sand, gravel, or boulders you can do where and how. And this has gone into a very short pamphlet, which has gone to the governments. Now, this is not happening as an academic exercise. Over the 12 years, there have been court cases. We've been in the High Court. The environmental protection agencies have been locking up mining operations. People have been hurt. The community activists have been hurt. Fortunately, nobody has been killed here as yet. There is about a revenue of ₹1 million almost a week going on over here, which doesn't sound that big, but it is feeding all the construction industries. Now, well, there are best practice guidelines and there are relocation plans. And if I go down to the institutional frameworks, now we have a committee, a biodiversity committee that is headed by the chief secretary of the province. And don't tell me what kind of personal connections we had to use to get the government at the highest level. First, we got the prime minister to inaugurate the national park. That was many years back. Now we have the head of the government and the mines and minerals department, all the departments sit on one table and see what is going on. So we don't go around rigmaroles of permits and everything which don't really work, but we get into action. The deputy commissioners are given instructions. They can be in trouble if they don't follow. The financial mechanisms that we've come up with, there will be charges for mining. Some of the money will, most of the money will go to the communities for protection and looking after the rivers. The rest goes to the departments. These kind of mechanisms we have tested, but the key to this is 42 village organizations, Masir Hifazati Tanzeems along the river that work and work together, and they're going to be part of the regulation. There is already a controlled permitted fishing going on, and for sand mining and gravel mining, we'd have a very parallel system that will come in place. Well, the story is pretty typical, just in terms of what the lessons learned are over here. I didn't talk about River Ravi. I worked on it for 3 years. It hasn't worked. There's a big development project that has taken over River Ravi. We also tried to convince the government to form the Ravi National Park, 42 kilometers along Lahore. It didn't work. We had visioning exercises, but the good thing is, after all that, the civil society in Lahore is now fighting the case. I don't have to go there every day and stand up. But in the Poonch River, we're well on our way. I would say we've solved about 70% of the problem. The 30% is remaining. We have the basis to go about it. But the lessons, this is a long-term game. You have to look at the river not just as a sand thing, but it's a living river. There's a lot of things around it, the river, the banks, the people around it. It's a whole ecosystem. It's alive. Get in early, do the advocacy, get the politicians, people on your side, and they should own the river. Unless they own the river, it's not going to work. And the most important are the people who are living by the river. People who are far away in their offices will not really care about it. So building the ownership of the river, then the advocacy part of it at political, administrative levels, then comes the science of it. And that is very, very important for informed decisions. And it helps you in the advocacy. And then building up the constituency and putting in the systems in place with all the players together. And as Zofeen said, taking them head on will not work. You will get crushed. And I've had people die in my work. I'm not never happy when that happens. Every time I tell myself, no more deaths in my work, they still happen. But there are other ways of going about it. Zofeen, thank you for giving me the opportunity. I'll stop over here now and over to you.
Vaqar Saab, thank you very much for your excellent presentation. And finding the right balance is the key to the success, I think, of your Poonch River project. And I think, as you said rightly, working with and involving and engaging with communities is probably the reason for the success. And I think we should all be looking at that. And I think Marc Goichot, who will be our next and our final speaker, will bring that out. He heads the WWF's freshwater program in Southeast Asia. Growing up in France, Marc learned to love the rivers while spending time fishing on the banks of River Rhône, but it traumatized him to see it transformed. The taming of the waters meant the fish disappeared. Ever since then, he has dedicated his life to uncovering the hidden value of rivers for people and nature. Having lived the last 25 years in Southeast Asia, he's not sure if he's a European anymore or an Asian yet. But he still carries a heavy French accent to remind himself and others where he was formatted. He also insists he will always remain a nose-up French wine connoisseur. Nevertheless, since the challenges to rivers are universal, he feels completely at home on the banks of any river. As for his next life, unlike Dipak ji, Marc is certain he wants to carry on the same work. My ghost will haunt all those who've harmed the freshwater ecosystems, he warns. I was told Marc has considerable experience taking on the sand miners in the Mekong Basin. And I think, Marc, it will be interesting to know what you did, and maybe we can learn a thing or two from your experience. So over to you, Marc.
Thank you, Zofeen, for the introduction. Here comes my French accent. Thank you to the previous speakers also. Let me allow me to contribute the perspective of the Mekong, but also to look at things from the cockpit of conservationists and maybe trying to be the voice of some of the most forgotten wildlife species on the planet. As you can see from this picture, the Mekong is a hard-working river, as are many of the Asian rivers. It means it contributes, it generates and delivers to its mouth large amounts of sediment. Among the sediment, sand is the most valuable to humans. It is also an important component of the ecosystems and supports the biodiversity, ecosystems, and livelihoods that depend on them, as noted by previous speakers. The role of WWF is to protect biodiversity. We all know that we're losing species at an alarming rate. What you may not know so well is that we're losing species in the freshwater biomes much faster than the terrestrial or marine biomes. And there's different reasons for this. And one of them is that a lot of those species at risk are hiding under the murky water of tropical rivers, but also because they are not so charismatic. Who cares for fish? Let's protect the elephants and the tigers. And yes, we can live without fish. If you do need a reason to care for fish, let me suggest food security. The wild fisheries, inland wild fisheries, are most probably the most sustainable way of producing protein. And it is because the fish are non-constructive users of the water, and they don't use land. And any alternative that is animal or non-animal needs much more water, much more land than wild fisheries. It is also the one that is the only affordable alternative for millions of communities, especially in Asia, that host the most productive inland fisheries in the world. So the sixth mass, so we're losing the Living Planet Index, which is a key reference document for WWF, shows that we have lost 84% of species abundance in the freshwater biomes. It's alarming. So the sixth extension that we all fear is happening in rivers before it is happening in forests or in oceans. So that's pretty striking and pretty alarming for us. So that's what we created, this emergency plan to look at this. It's a six-point plan. And you can see that one of those points is specifically fisheries and unsuitable sand mining. But actually, if you unpack a bit more, then protecting habitats means also in many instances that you need to address sand mining, which is one of the key threats to the source of habitat. But the number one and probably the most important of all those points is keeping the connectivity in rivers, keeping the rivers free flowing. Why is this important? First, the free flowingness definition for us includes movement of water, but also movement of sediment and movement of nutrient, and not only from upstream to downstream, but also from the river to the floodplains. The problem is that the management of rivers is in the hands of water resources people, and those people think water quality, water quantity, which are relevant and important dimensions to protect rivers, but not sufficient. And that's why we produced a definition and a map of the status of connectivity, because managers need figures and need equations. So there we have this map that we produced last year after 3 years of hard work, and that is now published in Nature, and I think being referenced as an important document to advance into that into the understanding of free flowing rivers and why they should happen. You see in this map that blue is good and red is not good. So South Asia is not good, and we need to address this. So why do we need to address this? We need to understand what are the key, how a river works, if you want. So water is important, but sediment is probably as important as water in a system, because it is the balance. So the rivers work basically as a conveyor belt. They transport the material that was created in the river to their mouth. And that's very process of transporting this sediment to the mouth that is so important for everything. It is the balance between water and sediment flows that create the slope, the width, the depth, and the sinuosity of rivers. So basically everything that you see is the result of this. If you change one or the other of those volumes, then the river will react and change its morphology. But it's not only the quantity of sediment, it is the quality, the grain size that is important. And actually, in fact, the coarser the grain size, the more important role it has. But in volumes of the total sediment load, it is the smallest. For the Mekong, for instance, and near natural conditions before 1990, the Mekong would produce 160 million tons as an average every year to its mouth. Only about 20 to 25 million tons were sand or coarser. Today, we estimate that the extraction rate of sand in the main stem is any place between 60 and 100 million tons. So let's say 80 million tons. So the river produces 20 million tons and we extract 80 million tons. So let's look at the river like if it was a budget. So the replenishment rate is your credit and the extraction is your debit. So you are extracting 4 times more than the river produces in natural state. If that was not concerning enough, then we have hydropower that traps sediment, and again, preferably trap the coarser sediment load. So today, the Mekong produces less than 5 million tons, and that number is going down. And the extraction rate is probably 80 million tons, and that is going up. So you don't need to have an advanced degree in banking to understand your system is not going to work. And the impact is already very clearly felt. For hundreds of kilometers from the southern part of Cambodia to the entire channel distribution of channel network of the delta in Vietnam, the riverbed has lost elevation between 2 and 3 meters in the past 20 years. That has dramatic consequences noted by other speakers on the biodiversity itself, on the replenishment of groundwater, on the stability of the banks, and causing the loss of socio-economic assets that are invaluable. But that's even worse downstream. What it does to deltas, basically, most deltas on the planet are sinking and shrinking much faster than sea level rise, which is already alarming. So in the Mekong, for each millimeter of sea level rise, you get a loss of 10 millimeters by subsidence, and 100 by riverbed erosion, 2 orders of magnitude more. And that's the key reason why salt intrusion are challenging biodiversity, but also the production of rice. So we're looking at the wrong tree, barking at the wrong tree, looking at climate. It is part, and we should address it, but we have more urgent. So alongside with dams and in situ extraction of water from the ground, then that are the key reasons why we're losing the resilience of large areas of land and economic. So it's affecting fish. There's 455 species of fish in the delta. Again, not charismatic. So yes, you don't care for them, understood. Let's have a human perspective to the problem. Many, actually most, because it's more than 50% of the large cities on the planet are sitting on low-lying sedimentary coasts that are sinking and shrinking. Not only South Asia is not an exception, actually it's one of the places where you have the most, and they are also the fastest growing population centers in the world. Irony is that it is those same cities that are creating the demand for sand. So basically they are the reason why they're sinking. So is this sustainable? Basically, clearly in Asia, the most cost-effective adaptation strategy needs to start with stopping to extract unconsiderable volumes of sand from its rivers. So often I've heard we can plant mangrove and that will protect us from the sea level rise and growing frequency intensity of storms linked to climate change. Yes, mangroves do protect communities, can protect cities in some cases from sea level rise and other climate change impacts. Yet, not only they need mud as the Achille heel to ensure that they sustained, but in case of the Mekong, we did this interesting study where we identified that actually it's sandbanks that often you don't see because they're above the sea level water, absorb the energy of waves and create the conditions for the mangroves to thrive and survive. If this sandbank, the sand in those sandbanks ends up in mixed concrete to build roads or to build buildings, then the feasibility of our plan to restore mangrove is going to be compromised. Seedlings would have no chance and will be washed away. So in conclusion, sand mining is central to the theory of change of WF's Resilient Asian Delta initiative. And ensuring sustainable management of sand is instrumental to the adaptation strategy of the world, and especially Asian countries, but it's also key to achieving other SDGs, from food security to secured livelihoods to thriving economies and the core mandate of core mission of WWF, biodiversity and associated ecosystems. So on the contrary, not addressing the scenario where you do not address the urgent issue of sand mining looks pretty grim. So it's pretty clear that over abstraction of sand from rivers belongs to the past, but that we have to be very pragmatic and we have to find an alternative. So we can look at reducing the demand, understanding that rivers are not bottomless barrels. There's a limited quantity of sand and we have to be wiser and valuing it. But so that's part of the problem, but also we need to find alternative sourcing. And it is opening questions of comparing apples and pears on the impacts of grinding mountains. So it's not rocket science to make sand. You take a rock and take a hammer and you can produce it, but it comes with its own set of challenges, but pretty clear that the cost benefit analysis of over abstraction of sand in the rivers is completely nonsense. Thank you for your attention.
Zofeen, you're on mute.
Yeah. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much, Mark. Very, very interesting, and a lot of points that you gave to all of us. And I'm sure we've learned a lot from you. I will now open for Q&A. And my first question, the participants haven't said who they want this question to be answered by, so I'll take the prerogative of asking the guests myself. So this one is from Tuhin Subra Mandal. And he or she, I don't know, is saying illegal sand mining is also affecting transboundary rivers in management, is it not? What are the solutions? And again, how community participation is ensured in this sector where sand mafia are existing in this system and administration. So I would ask Vaqar Saab to please respond to this.
Thank you, Zofeen. Interesting question. Transboundary, we have an interesting case of the Indus Waters Treaty that has held between India and Pakistan through all the wars and difficult times. And it's, I think what people don't know about it, most people think Indus Water Treaty is about apportionment of waters. It is also apportionment of sediment. The water and sediment are considered to be equally important. So in my own engagement on the Kishanganga Dam on the Kishanganga River, Neelam River as we call it, the designs were reviewed to make sure that India does not hold the sediment, but it has to release all the sediment that is trapped. So it has to be run of the river project, and the reservoirs have to be small, and there have to be mechanisms for flushing the gates. And this is every project that comes up under the Indus Water Treaty, there is a dispute and it goes into discussion into very technical details where the flushing gates are located, for example. So that's one example which has actually worked quite well. However, the upper riparians always have an advantage of extracting sediment. And if they take away all the boulders, as Dipak Saab rightly said, these boulders won't be ground into sand and gravel and silt. So things will change. And that is one part which has yet to be addressed, and it is not really monitored as yet. But I would suggest that worry less about transboundary. The rivers, the life in it, and the people who are living around it don't really looking at their passports and nationalities. It's the same river. The river doesn't know where it crosses the border. So dams that we are building everywhere within the countries are probably doing more harm than the dams that are being built on transboundary. But ultimately, when we have a good world, then the rights to sediment of upper, lower riparians, no matter which country or which basin they are, those will have to be protected. And it takes us back to sediment, sustainable sediment mining. Kate Brown, working with me on Poonch River, said, I told her, well, 100 tons of sediment is coming in and we are only taking 20 tons, so we can go take more. And she said, no, you should not be taking more than 25 tons because the rest has to go down for somebody else. So difficult things. So I would suggest look at it in transboundary and enter in within the basin concept as well.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Vaqar Saab. And we've got lots and lots of questions here. My next question is to Dipak ji. Again, I'm apologize. I do not know the gender, so if there's any mistake there. This is by Yugdeep Luitel. He's asking the environmental assessment is mandatory because of legal issues, but the reports are kept locked inside the store. In Nepal, a strong environment regulatory body in provincial level must be established rather than the local government having all responsibility of environmental assessment approval, extraction, monitoring, everything. Deepak ji, would you like to make a comment on this, please?
Yeah, I think I've also written some of my replies. Uh, as a well, as a former minister, water minister, I would be extremely hesitant to create more regulatory bodies, whether upstream, at the local level or the national level, whatever. And the reason I say this is because our overall South Asia experience with the environmental ministry. When it was first created here, I was kind of uh, opposed to it. Of course, it doesn't mean anything. They went ahead and created it. But my argument was that by creating an environmental ministry, you actually marginalize the environment. I mean, it should have been a powerful commission under the prime minister or something like that, and that's it. Okay, but environment ministries are hated by every other ministry, especially the powerful ones, except my good friend Ganesha, who became environment minister, and another one. The name escapes me right now. We've only had two people who became environment ministers who were committed to the environment. You know, this is more of a shunting yard post for politicians. Yeah, you need to give them a post, but the party doesn't want to give them too powerful a position like a home minister or a finance minister. Okay, so you see these at the provincial or a local level, I would put more faith in actually creating civic bodies and civic movements that are more active. In fact, I have argued that creating a human rights commission has really killed human rights because it has killed human rights activism. Everybody now thinks, oh, human rights commission will do it. Of course, they're a government body, they have their problems, they're enmeshed in procedural fetishism and so on. So I would argue that, now I give you two more examples. Yeah, we have got some kind of e-flow regulation. Okay, and every hydropower plant I know has flouted it. And when I've gone and visited these places and talked and said, why don't you? They said, listen, there are two sets of government regulations we have to follow. One is the contract we have with the national government utility for supplying electricity, which demands that we give a minimum amount every year or we suffer a fine. Now, that is metered, okay? And it's seen right in the center at the dispatch center how much electricity we have provided. We go below that, we are fined, okay? Who comes and monitors e-flows, Well, if they come and monitor it one fine day and we get caught or something like that, we'll pay the fine, you know. But it's just not worth our while even to bother with the flows. Okay, so so there are many environmental things like that. There's a celebrated case of an environmental impact study for a big controversial project in Nepal, a airport project that plans to decimate practically all the forest of the Tarai in one area to create a massive new airport. Probably going to be in area terms one of the largest areas in the world, airports in the world. Why do we need it in Nepal? I don't know. But it's essentially about cutting timber and exporting it, and the rest of the land being used for what is called plotting mafia to sell as land and development. Okay, airport is only a side issue. Okay, now the environmental impact of that airport was apparently a cut and paste job done from a hydropower project of a World Bank thing that the World Bank walked out of afterwards, Arun 3. Okay. So you see, so let's not place too much faith in these procedural fetishism things, and let's begin to put more faith in actual civic and environmental activism. That's what I would say.
Thank you so much. So the cut and paste jobs happen in Nepal also. Swati Saab wants someone, and I'll ask Siddharth maybe. And he's saying that in Rajasthan, where he hails from Rajasthan, and he's saying there's been a rise in illegal sand mining in the last 15 years. Every now and then, newspapers is flashed with news of sand mafia attacked or killed the police authorities who were trying to capture the sand mafia. I think killed by the police. So my question is how to put a stop to this when there is no fear of law and authorities.
Right. Thanks, Zofeen. I think the statement is correct that they might have killed the police authorities because that has happened a lot of times uh,
Okay.
in recent times. Um, I mean, I just want to add something to what Deepak ji said about the environment ministry and it being just a side ministry, whereas the others are powerful. In India, we've resolved by making the Minister of Heavy Industries and the Minister of Environment and Forest are the same person. So we just resolved that whole issue of conflict. uh, um, to the uh, question that Swati has asked, again, I think what Deepak ji mentioned, that creating new laws or creating new governance mechanisms might not solve this, because we may not have the perfect mechanisms, but we do have some mechanisms which are clearly failing. Even judicial interventions that have happened over the years has not been enforced, as we've learned recently. I do agree very much with Deepak ji when he says that civic activism is going to be an important route. And a parallel that I would draw is, first is that we need to understand the importance of sand and sediment, which can fuel a movement similar to how we had the right to information movement, where unless the civic society understands the fact on how important this is and what this is driving in terms of corruption, how this is driving extinction, how this is really dragging democracy to its death. I think unless we understand, because sand mining also feeds the political economy and keeps the political parties immune from other fluctuations in the market or withdrawal of support from people. So unless we understand that and work on that as a movement, as a civic movement, which ensures that we have adequate enforcement of law, because unfortunately there is not as much trust in the government itself to really take action. So it has to be the people who drive it. And just to take another sentence to add to what Tuhin had asked, and there are other questions also in terms of transboundary. How I personally see it is the fact that unless we recognize the right of the river itself, there is no way we are going to agree to uh, uh,
Protect the rivers.
say, that India should get this much, or Nepal should get this much, or Bangladesh or Pakistan, unless the right of the river is maintained to hold a certain amount of sediment, which is its first right. I think that is going to be essential for us to agree upon. I mean, like Deepak ji has already mentioned in an answer, that might be a far dream, but I think we need to dream. I think the need to dream is more today than any time else.
I think that's why we should probably start with the living rivers conversation and continue with that and take it forward. Anyway, my next question is the next question is by Radhika Javeri, and she's asking, and Mark, maybe you would like to take this on. She's asking, is there any think tank doing R&? Sorry, yeah. First question is that. What work has been done in terms of involving people involved in the construction industry, like architects, in this conversation? And on the side, she has another question, that is there any think tank research and development in finding synthetic alternatives to sand? Mark?
Thank you. Yeah. Uh, at some stage also, if you allow me, I would like to add some element of response to the questions that were asked to Vaqar. So if you allow me this later, I will do it, but I'll take that or now, whatever. Yeah.
You can do it now.
Okay, so I'll do it now. Maybe 3 points. First, so in general, I agree with all the points made by Vaqar. I just want to add, but the first point, I'm a bit less optimist on the feasibility of flushing, because from a technical perspective, if the reservoir is more than 20 kilometers long, it is very difficult to get sediment across, but possible. The thing is, it has a very high governance dimension. So we often focus on technique, but the places where it has been relatively successful in Japan and in France have required huge governance capacity And in the places we are talking to, the rivers in South Asia or in Southeast Asia, those governance mechanisms are already fairly very simple task, and that one is a complex one. So I would be cautious there. Beyond this, it implies lowering reservoirs, and if you lowering reservoir, it has significant cost on productivity of electricity when you have the power project, or on other operation rules for dams that have multiple purposes. So there's a counter incentive to make this happen. And also, if you do store a lot of sediment for 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, and release it at once, then you reach some density of sediment that are dangerous downstream, very dangerous for life downstream. If you are above 30 grams per liter, you will probably have very significant death rates for 20, 30 kilometers downstream. If you're above 50 grams, you kill everything. This precedent, the Rhone, who is supposed to be the managers of the Rhone, who are supposed to be the champions of flushing, did this mismanagement 2012, and they killed absolutely every fish for 30 kilometers. The problem of quota for sand mining, sand budgets, it's very difficult. And often the decision is with economists. Economists think linear natural systems are functioning by thresholds. It's very difficult to know what threshold you're going to reach. And after you reach a threshold, the river changes. There's no turning back. Open the cap, and then you have a different river with implications to biodiversity and people that live on it. As for banning sand, it comes with downsides also, because as long as you don't have an alternative, if you ban sand, then you push illegality further into further entrenchments. And if you jail people, it's the same thing. There will be more. As long as the demand is there, then there will be somebody to meet it, because the price will just skyrocket. The later question, yes, there are some attempts to engage the private sector. There are some private sector association. Aggregates Association is a global association called GAIN, which is a global association for information, global aggregate information network. And then there's an equivalent in Europe. And they see sand mining and its numerous impacts that we have all listed as clear reputational risk. And they want to do something about it. So they understand the market is growing, and that is hurting them. And the volumes are small and getting smaller in rivers, and the demand is getting bigger. So they are working on a list of sustainability principles that they could apply to sourcing of sand. They work on addressing what biodiversity is there before they get a concession, ensuring they get as much biodiversity after. There's pros and cons of this. Basically, you give them a mountain, they give you back a wetland. So there's more species in it in terms of numbers, but they are not the same ecosystems. So that's a bit of a problem. But for the rest, they're trying to work on energy, because producing artificial sand is possible, but it's very high. It has a very high cost on energy. So they're trying to go solar and try to go to find ways to do this, manage dust, manage noise, manage water quality also, because you need a lot of water and solvents and separating the different grain sizes. So there's a real will from the network, from some networks of some front runners in sustainability in the private sector, but again, profit driven. So I think we still need platforms that are more inclusive, and a lot of work to be put into engagement with the private sector to make it work and have really a sustainable alternative to in-channel sand mining.
Thank you very much, Marc. Rizwana, I have a question for you. It is by Inamul Mazid Khan Siddiq. Do you see any scope for the UN guiding principles on business and human rights to be used to regulate, control negative impacts of sand mining, at least stop them from attacking communities and activists?
It depends on the level at which it's operating. I think the guiding principles can be a good tool to document the violation, but these are actually voluntary principles. When we have laws that are binding, that are enforceable, but still not being applied, I would say that to give them a bad name, to scandalize them, yes, you could rely on the guiding principles, but to what extent the guiding principles would actually be able to put an end to the practice, that's not very clear to me. Because we have got very elaborate penal and criminal law, we have got our own laws, own rules to regulate the business, we have laws that talk about sanctions against the minors for criminalizing the activists, but nothing is being actually enforced against the wrongdoers. So, yes, the guiding principles can add to the basket. You can use them for defaming, for scandalizing the wrongdoers, but I don't think they'll actually be able to bring any, you know, end uh, to this conflict. I don't think so.
Thank you, Rizwana. Um, there is an anonymous attendee, and his question is to Marc. What data was used for the extraction versus replenishment map?
Thank you for the question. What we did is we did interviews. So we basically had teams walking the bank, driving our boats on the entire stretch of the river and the four Mekong countries. So from Laos, Thailand, Cambodia, and Vietnam, and submitting questionnaires to the extractors. At the time, this was the field work was done in 2011, 2012. The issue was not so contentious as it is today. So most of them accepted. But this is clearly stated in our paper that we consider that those figures are an underestimation of reality, because there's a tendency for extractors to under-report and over-extract, if you want. So that's why we kept those figures as they are, but more recent estimations are putting those figures at much higher rates. But yeah, they were based on direct interviews to the sand miners. Oh.
Thank you, Marc. Vaqar Saab, to you. Can you explain how riverbed mining in downstream affects upstream? Or vice versa, for that matter, I think.
The upstream would affect downstream, but the downstream would not really affect the upstream. Well, upstream mining, the most serious impact is what we say, the scouring of the rivers downstream. When the water becomes free of sediment, it becomes sediment hungry, and it starts eating into the banks to take away the sediment. So as Marc was saying, when we build large hydropower dams, that will block sediments. They have big reservoirs. Then all the sediment is trapped. So what you'd see downstream would be clear water. Now, what it would do to ecology would be a lot of things. It will change the ecology. Some fish will get eaten up. Some fish will thrive at the expense of others. Some fish that need turbidity to hide will be gone. But the most serious one is that all the way downstream, then the banks will start eroding because that water wants to find the sediment. So that's the biggest risk. Other than that, what happens is, and this is happening on the Ravi, where the Ravi water belongs to India, and all the sediment is also trapped. So now there is a big Lahore city that wants sediment, and it's taking sediment out, millions of years old sediment out from the riverbed to build all these big housing societies, and there's nothing coming in from upstream. That's the crisis is even worse than what we see in some other parts of the world. So the demand for sediment won't be met, and then they will start digging up wherever. They're buying agricultural fields, which were once in the floodplain, and digging them up 40, 50, 60 feet deep, just as in Bangladesh. They buy the whole land and dig it up. So that the supply also starts changing the markets and the appetites for what is being extracted. So yeah, downstream would be havocs in so many different ways, every which way.
Thank you, Vaqar Sab.
I may just add,
Yes.
no, I think my overall take, this is something that I've been trying to say, uh, you cannot work on all of this without good science. And I think in these forums, I see there is so much of passion and there's so much of advocacy. But the facts, the knowledge behind it is missing. So you would often end up with strategies that not really end up with giving you the right results. No two rivers are alike, no two situations are alike, no two governments are alike, but understanding the dynamics and the fundamentals is a lot of effort. And I don't see, I mean, we're talking about spending $500,000 or $1 million just to understand how much of sediment is coming in, where it is getting deposited, what is it going to people, to ecosystems. And then you want to understand if you're going to change something, what's going to happen. So the advocacy and the management strategies need all of this science. And I don't see much of it at all. The science has to be the basis for planning, management, advocacy, and fighting, everything. It has to start over there. And there's a lot of good work being done, but it's a lot of very difficult effort. So have to be informed strategies and informed decisions. And then on that basis, you go engage and build up a constituency in people. Dipak is entirely right. In South Asia, I learned very early when I came back from the US 40, 30 years back, that the departments are meant to do the opposite for what they're formed for. So the health department will make sure that people don't get healthy. And the environmental department will make sure that we don't get a good environment. So you have to have constituency, build your own constituency in civil society, in people and everybody to start the battle. The ownership of rivers is central to all of this. And you build ownership by telling people what the living river really are, build that relationship with the rivers. That is where this all starts, from a relationship. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Vaqar Sab. We have very little time. I'll try to wrap up by 12:28 because we'll probably be off by 12:30. But I want to ask a few more questions, and it'll be nice if it can be responded to in a concise manner. So, Mark, there's one for you from Sokem Peck. How sand mining has affected the boundary between Laos and Thailand? Why they seem to be okay with that? Do you think the dam development has taken the most of the attention?
Thank you, Sokem. Yeah, I will very briefly. I just want to add to what what the previous speaker has said, and I agree with everything Jackie King has taught you very well, Vaqar. She has taught me a lot also. I just want to say a very simple thing. The impacts that we're seeing from sand mining take a very long time actually to unfold. In large systems like the one we're talking, they can take up to 50 years. So basically, we have not yet felt the dimension of the impact that we have created already. And the response needs exactly what Vaqar says, a very complex interaction and a transformation of the ways we work on governance. And I'm a bit concerned because when I see the difficulty we have to address very simple things like plastic bags in the ocean, having to address such a complex equation in such an urgent situation is something that needs much more attention. So thank you for this webinar, but that's very important that we get this out. To the question of Sokem, until the capital city of Laos, Vientiane, the riverbed of the Mekong is kind of it's on bedrock, so it's kind of unmovable. So despite reduction of sediment, then it is pretty resilient. So I don't think there will be many changes. But downstream, the stretch between Vientiane and Paxe, which is also the border between Laos and Cambodia, the bedrock plunges, and then we have sediment. That is at high risk of moving. And the border is the talweg. So the first thing that moves. So when you have incision, the talweg moves. And this means that, yes, it will probably create more tension, and the government and the military of Thailand are very conscious of this and very worried about this. And that's after saying what is the attributed to dams and what is attributed to sand mining, I think they are cumulative. Probably what we see immediately is sand mining, but the impact of dams will be cumulative and will come a bit later because it will take a bit more time for the dams in China and the new dams built on the upper part of the course of the Mekong in Laos to come in. But basically, we have all the elements that will create the typical transboundary conflict. And more is coming. So in the recent comments from the Thai government on their concern regarding the Sanakam proposed dam, I think are showing that they are taking this seriously. So yes, it is probably going to be a governance issue that is going to make the front page of the media for in the coming years. Over.
Thank you. Rizwana, one question for you. It's by an anonymous attendee. It says rivers are complicated and it might be safe to say that each one of them is unique in its own way. And that they have the panelists advocate for river rights. But how will a legal body go on about it? How do we define rights of a hugely dynamic system?
We humans are also very different, no? I don't look like you. Nor does Mark look like me. Nor do I have any similarity with Siddharth. But if we take rivers as an ecosystem, there can be different types of rivers, but there can be certain general rights that can be defined. And fortunately, the courts are coming up uh, quite elaborately in defining the rights of the river. I must mention here a judgment of the Bangladesh Supreme Court that has declared rivers as legal person and have said that any damage that is done to a river, for that the state shall be held liable because the state is taken as a trustee of all these ecosystems. So, of course, as like as with the human beings, an American is much more stronger than a Bangladeshi. Similarly, a lower riparian river will not be as healthy perhaps as an upper riparian river. But once we define the rivers as an ecosystem, we take it as a life system, I don't think it will be difficult for anyone to define the rights of river. And we have the World Charter for Nature that has given us some guiding principles in that regard. We have guidance from the New Zealand court also in that respect. Basically, the fact is you utilize the resource, you make use of it, but you don't deprive the communities that are primarily dependent on it. Your use should be sustainable, that only you should not be eating it up. You should be leaving it for the next generation. But the first priority should be considering it as a life system and first talking about its protection. Don't do anything that will kill it, because you can have 100 industries, you can have 2000 buildings, but once you destroy a river, you will never be able to create a river. So what you can't create, do not destroy it. Thank you.
Thank you. Good. Very nice, Rizwana. Now, this question is to Marc, but I would also like to get a very, very brief input from Dipak ji as well. So Asnarit Tep is asking Marc, we know we cannot ask the government and companies to stop mining because urban development requires it. How do we advocate for a sustainable practice for the kind of emerging sand mining need? And what can repair the damage made to sand in lower river in Cambodia, and how resilient the river system can be in the coming years, including sand and other sediment? Marc, maybe you can go first, and then Dipak ji, maybe you can add on to it.
Thank you to my colleague Asnarit. Cambodia is in a very difficult situation because it is most of its people live on the natural levees of the Mekong, the ones that are at risk already from sand mining. On top of this, river incision means that it will probably affect significantly in the future, maybe already today, the exchange between the river and the Tonle Sap, which is basically the food security basket of the country. Uh, I think we need a multi-pronged approach in order to do this. So yes, we cannot ban because the demand for sand in Cambodia is booming because the sector is booming. So we need on one side to raise awareness of the impacts and those very serious impacts for Cambodia, but also the impacts Cambodia could have on its neighbors in Vietnam that are already well understood and create more international conflict. So we need to have a budget that allows to know what quotas could be and what affordable quotas, and then this would help to go from cost to value. Basically, today, if you buy a cubic meter of sand to build your house in Cambodia, you pay for the dredger and you pay for the truck to bring it to you. You do not pay for the value of the sand for the other users. So we need to have this equation understood and put into policies. And then once you have this, and you have those policies, then you can do the cost benefit analysis of different sourcing areas and then make sure that you have enforcement and some mechanisms that allow the responsible players to do this. In general, the ones I talk to do not mind. So the developers say, I do not mind if I pay my sand more as long as my competitors have the same. So we need to create this leveling field that allows that everybody takes the burden as the same logic that we have for certification of other resources. And that's, I think, going to be important. And once you have the real price, a higher price, that the market automatically is going to be more cautious on how much they use, and alternative construction material or being much more responsible on the quantities we use may come automatically or may need a bit of a push from a lot, but that will be. So I think with this multi-pronged approach on all of those fronts, and we have a project actually in Vietnam that we're complementing with the government of Vietnam, the Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Development, that is starting to implement such a strategy. So we have funding from the German government to implement that project. I believe it would be applicable to Cambodia. It may be applicable to many countries in South Asia also. Over.
Thank you. Thank you, Marc. Deepak ji, would you like to add something to this?
Yeah, I mean, hearing all this, this issue of sand mining, riverbed mining, we've just touched on some of the uh, ramifications actually, which are extremely important. One was the issue of river rights, okay, and the other I raised about e-flows, for instance. These are all related. I mean, you cannot separate sand and riverbed mining from issues of what the e-flows should be. Okay, we cannot separate them from the issues of what was talked about river rights. So I think this is one part of an overall problem of how we look at rivers. And I have been going one step further than just E flows and arguing for what I call S flows and N flows. Okay? Now, N flows are obvious, navigational flows. And the reason I advocate for that is that for navigation, at least you need water in the river. So if we make navigation an important part of our overall social lives, immediately there's a pressure to regulate riverbed mining because you got to get ships, boats moving on rivers. Okay, and that's the cheapest form of transport. No area, North America, no Europe, none of them have developed without first developing riverine transport. It's the cheapest form of transport in our carbon fueled age with climate change. So we have to go there. But S flows are even more important to me. S flows, by that I mean spiritual flows. The Indus, the Ganges, the Ganga, the Brahmaputra, the Mekong, the rivers of South India, Sri Lanka's Mahaveli, these are civilizational rivers. We have a very different societal relation to rivers that we are kind of forgetting. Okay? And to understand and manage what S flows are, for instance, I believe in Allahabad when the Kumbh Mela was taking place, very surreptitiously, without much fanfare, the government of India had to empty the Tehri reservoir just so that people had sufficient water in Allahabad to take a bath during the holy Sangam month. Okay. Now, we have forgotten all this, and limited our understanding of rivers to either just water when we talk hydropower, or looking at it only as sediment that comes that we need to mine. You know, there's a more complex totality that we need to look at, that have to be balanced in all their elements. You know, from sand and matter that the rivers carry, to water, to fish, to our spiritual values, to other economic benefits that we have ignored, like navigation, inland navigation. So I think, the essence of it, to me, the bottom line is, we need to take a far broader civilizational view of our rivers if we want to have a healthy society.
Thank you. Thank you, Dipak ji. We have a question from Manoj Misra about how about he asked, how about ethical consumer movement to encourage a property buyer to seek prior third-party certification that only legal, sustainably extracted sand has been used. But I believe I'm told by my editor that that he heads the Yamuna GA Abhiyan, and I would like Manoj Saab, if you don't mind, to please unmute yourself and respond to this yourself. Manoj Saab, are you there?
I think Ramesh will have to selectively ask him to, yeah, I think.
Yeah, done. Manojji, please. I have unmuted your mic.
Still on mute though.
Oh, really? I have
Yeah.
asked him to unmute. Can you unmute your mic? I have given the permission.
Yeah. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. You see, what I'm trying to say is that until unless it is the consumer who starts to actually taking on this responsibility, that I shall refuse to, because ultimately who is driving this whole thing? Somebody is buying what is being constructed. So at the end of the spectrum is this person, and if this person decides that until unless I have this certification, and a certification that I can actually believe in, that whatever material has been used in this construction is legal, is sustainably sourced, I'm not going to buy it. Now, I know it's not very easy to implement, but there are, in the Western world, this ethical consumer movement where they will say that, okay, if this cloth has been manufactured using child labor, I will not buy it. Something on those lines will have to be actually started for many other things, including sand and other material used in construction. So this is what I was trying to actually suggest.
Okay, thank you, Manoj Saab. Thank you so much. And there is one question I have to take because it interests me and many other of my colleagues, but I just need like 2 minutes from somebody to respond. And it could be Siddharth, it could be you, because so my colleague is asking, as experts, all of you have said that South Asian journalists should cover this or should cover this. It's a good, important issue. But he's saying, I'm asking this question because writing on sand mining issues is one of the most challenging and risky journalism. So many journalists got killed over the years in India, Bangladesh, and I'm sure in other countries as well. So for journalists, what would be the best way to cover these issues, keeping safety and security in mind? How would they ensure that they won't be killed or face false charges or cases after they file stories on these issues. Also, there is a strong need for policy change, not only in Bangladesh, but also in the whole of South Asia and Southeast Asia. Do you think strong policy influencing push is required? If yes, how can journalists support that process, since there are a lot of actors and factors are involved? Thanks.
Right. I'll try and answer that quickly. Um, Before that, I just want to add that what Manoj Mishra ji said. Just one addition that we've discussed this earlier as well, that the government is the biggest builder. So if the government itself, and takes up the idea that all sand that it uses will be ethical, I think that will itself be a huge push. In India, it's the biggest builder, infrastructure builder. To this question of Zubedur, I think. I'm sorry to say, but there is no way we can ensure anybody's safety. This is a very risky profile to be reporting on, and uh, I don't mean to be dismissive, but I think this is a risk that comes with reporting on this, which is unfortunate. But at the same time, building a coalition, uh, working along with other journalists as a uh, larger group, I think is one of the more effective ways to report on this, as well as distribute the risk, if at all. Along with that, there is modern technology that allows us to access information remotely. And we need to become smart to be able to use that effectively in our reporting. These are things that even the Supreme Court of India, in India's case, is considering as hard evidence in the court. So I think these are things that, I mean, it will never be risk free as long as the kind of political economy that it fuels exists and the kind of greed exists. People's movement, along with a coalition of journalists and media personnel, I think can really work towards resolving this. And I think even the reporting of it, and both editors and editors also need to give this enough space, not just the reporters, which allows this to be documented and be in the public domain. So
Thank
yeah.
you. Thank you, Siddharth. Maybe, Rizwana, maybe in just like half a minute, you could also tackle this question.
You're on mute.
I actually was writing a comment about the certification process. See, who will be doing the certification? If it is the government agencies, why could not they regulate the sector? When they have been deliberately failing to regulate the sector, expecting them to certify it properly is something that's very problematic for me to accept. We have seen what has happened in the shipbreaking industry. We have also seen what's happening in the shrimp industry. They are forcefully grabbing farmers' land, getting it intruded with saline water, doing the shrimp cultivation, exporting it. And there are third-party auditors coming under the supervision of the government, and they are certifying these farms to be eco-friendly and sustainable. And the export is actually continuing while the farmers are being killed for protesting against grabbing of their land. So certification remains actually a very problematic issue. And I think we need to discuss it further before we take it as a recommendation. Thanks.
Thank you, everyone. I'm afraid I cannot take and apologize my बहुत सारी apologies for those whose questions I was unable to take. I think we run out of time. I'll just say a quick thank you to my dear panelists. You were very, very good, very engaging. I learned a lot, and I think me and my colleagues will all have. We probably have a lot of story ideas to work on. Just need to keep the safety aspect in mind also. And as Vaqar said, we need to be also more well informed with kind of armed with scientific knowledge. Thank you all of you for your time. And it's been like a good over 2 hours with you all. And I think I learned a lot. Thank you so much. And Khuda Hafiz from here, from Karachi, from me.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it was a very good panel. Thank you so much.